Okay, so polytheists often get a question, which is that you can't be a polytheist. You can't really worship the gods because there is no historical link between the communities that worshipped the gods that you say you worship, like Zeus and Athena and Aphrodite, or Mars and Quirinus, or whatever your reconstructed, I use that in a wide sense, tradition is, and today, right? The chain of initiation is broken, is said these kinds of ways. Use and of course, this isn't true for every um, polytheistic tradition, and sometimes you will get uh, people from other polytheist traditions, sometimes being appreciative and talking to uh, Reconstructionists in a broad sense, favorably and cooperating with what they do. But sometimes, like on Twitter, a while back, was it Blue Sky? There was a very nasty post by someone from an African diasporic tradition who was claiming that Hellenic Reconstructionists were all LARPing. And that is, a very unfortunate kind of interaction that uh, is rather pointless. And I wanted to address this. So, I mean, it's also this kind of complaint also comes, for instance, if you read René Guénon, right? René Guénon will insist on the need for people to be in a regular chain of initiation, right? And this is the reason why Guénon and perennialism in general um, stresses the need to participate and to be a member of a traditional religion, even one that they consider that has degenerated badly, like Catholicism or something, because they think that there is still the tradition is still latent, is present in a latent form. And well, what occurs to me is that Plato, in his texts, he clearly compares philosophy to initiations, to the mysteries, right? This is a common thread in Plato's text. And the Phaedo in philosophy is said to be the true purification. In the Phaedrus, the vision of the forms through dialectic is said to compare to with the epopeia, the vision at the end of the mysteries. That was the culminating point of the mysteries. And it's, of course, not just Plato, right? So Parmenides' proem was uh, included a description of being led to the edge of the world, crossing into the world, to the domain of the dead, right? Oh, mortal, you are luck. No ill fate has brought you here, and there receiving a revelation from a goddess. Um, and even sober Aristotle, in his book Alpha of the Metaphysics, he writes that, we could not have wisdom if the gods were jealous, right? So the generosity of the gods for him is a precondition for the possibility of first philosophy. And Stoics were involved in, for instance, etymological analyses of Greek words and of like interpreting Hesiod because they had this idea that there was a direct correspondence between as it were language and nature originally, and so they too had this uh, strongly religious component in their philosophy, not to mention the importance of oracles in their conception of fate. Even the Epicureans, held the gods um, as models of sagehood. What is the point of all this? The point of all this is that philosophy itself styled itself as, in some sense, a divine revelation, is grounded in the gods, and especially Platonic philosophy did this. And so, in principle, if we have philosophy, we do have a form of initiation. Now, one of the reasons that people ignored this or ignore this is because the tools for, as it were, taking the polytheism and taking the piety of Greek philosophy seriously were mainly developed by late Platonists. And in the early 20th century, there was this idea that late Platonism was some kind of oriental infiltration into the rational Greek spirit. And that their ideas that Plotinus is ascent to the one, and that later ideas about theurgy, these were all non-Greek ideas that entered into Greek philosophy. So even Guénon mentions this in his Crisis of the Modern World. He talks about how the Alexandrine philosophy tried to rehabilitate the Hellenic spirit with Oriental borrowings. Now, this is just old history. It no longer holds. We can find motivations for most, if not all, of the developments of the later Greek philosophers in the Greek tradition itself. And also, we don't hold to this idea of hermetically distinct cultures. Also, that doesn't hold so much water. So this whole conception of Neoplatonism as an Oriental grafting isn't um, uh, isn't necessary anymore. So we can see that their account of philosophy as itself being a divine revelation, Plato as the greatest theologian because he explained things dialectically, is something that we can, as it were, take as proper to philosophy and not something that is alien to it and extrinsic in some way. So philosophy itself can give us access to the gods, right? And so when we read all this stuff about, oh, how philosophy has its roots in a religion, we shouldn't necessarily jump to the conclusion, oh, therefore, since religion is corrupt nowadays, we can't do philosophy properly, or, oh, I need to join a religious tradition to do philosophy. No, there is something divine about philosophy itself, right? And to this, there's a comment um, by Guénon in one of his uh, books, I think it's in the Considerations on Initiation, where he said, look, this is just like a law of nature. Same way that it is a law that you cannot be born without being born from the mother, though we could imagine people being just born from the earth and things like that. So also, it's just a law of the spiritual life that you have to have a spiritual father. You have to be initiated by someone. Now, fact of the matter is that the Neoplatonists address this directly. Um, in Plato, there is a myth about a time when people were born out of the earth, right? He takes up this mythical trope from the Greek ideas about autochthonous human beings who were born from the earth, and he incorporates this into his myth about who is the true statesman in his dialogue, The Statesman. And there he talks about how at one point the world has two kinds of periods it goes through. It has the period where which is like the one we have now, where we grow older and older and older, and we are born from other human beings, and and we die of old age or we die violent deaths. However, and this is the period when the gods have somehow abandoned us. We have abandoned the world to itself, and we have to fend for ourselves. However, this is in contrast to the period when the god directly took care of the world and everything went backwards. The stars rose in the west and set in the east, and instead of us being born children and getting older and older and older, we were born from the ground fully formed and became younger and younger and younger. Right. And so so he's dealing precisely with the question or he puts the question, is there a situation in which human beings are not born from other human beings? Now, when Proclus addresses this text, he says that this is not about actually two periods of the world. This is about the bodily life, which is the life under fate, which is the life of where we get older and older and older, as opposed to the spiritual life, where indeed we get younger and younger and younger, and we are born by ourselves from the ground, right? He interprets this being born from the ground as a metaphor for death, right? We are born from our bodily tubes. And And therefore he connects this with the Phaedo, right? So this is all in Platonic Theology, Book 5. And he connects this with a Phaedo, therefore, which says that the philosopher actively wants death, right? And so we might need parents in order to be born, but we sure as hell don't need anyone else to die. This is our natural fate as human beings, and the philosopher embraces this. He sees that this our being towards death is actually an opportunity. He appropriates this in his ascetic life to separate himself from the body, and he doesn't need someone else to do this, right? Of course, having teachers helps in principle. The teacher does not pour in knowledge from the outside, but merely stimulates what's inside. So the Platonic philosophers themselves did not believe that you needed, as it were, initiatory parents. But rather they thought that philosophy itself is a divine gift, and that reason itself can lead us towards the divine. Right? And you don't need the date of historical tradition. This was one of the the subjects in my discussion with Edward Butler last year about whether we can have nameless gods and whether they can be gods with overlapping domains. Well, but there are gods with overlapping domains, everyone agrees. But in my solution to what this means, I came to the conclusion that there can be nameless gods, or in line with my more recent series, nameless titans, right? So, like the sun, we have a direct access to the sun, even if we don't have a specific name or myth or right to it. And it is the sun in its foundational role for human life and experience, and all life and experience, which is divine, right? Which is titanic. And um, therefore, the world itself is always speaking to us. Why do we need these specific historical traditions? Of course, they can help, and of course, there is the theoi are working through them as well, but there is no actual need for this. The the world is so beautiful and it is so infused with divinity and meaning that we are not bound to this historical determinism. Okay? So that is my initial answer for the question about whether we can actually truly access the gods today, even if we have not received an unbroken historical link to the first communities that were inspired by them. Right? Inspiration is not something handed down historically. Inspiration is something that fills the whole world, that fills the cosmos, and reason and philosophy can purify us to become apt vessels to absorb the divinity of the cosmos and to become its heralds. Okay? That, therefore, is my spiel about this.